The scorching desert sun beat down mercilessly on the concrete of the Falcon Air Base, creating shimmering heat waves that distorted the arid landscape. It was a stifling Tuesday in December when General Hayes called a meeting of the entire military high command for what he termed a pedagogical demonstration on preparedness and instinct. At 62, with a flawless career, chest laden with medals, and an arrogance that cut the air like a knife, Hayes was known for his disdain of anything he considered civilian weakness. In the briefing room, packed with colonels, majors, and aeronautical engineers, the general paced back and forth, his military boots echoing on the polished floor. "Gentlemen," he said, stopping before a screen displaying an image of an F-5 Tiger fighter jet. "Today, you will witness why years of military training and discipline are irreplaceable. I have randomly selected a person from the local community to attempt to operate our most advanced flight simulator. It will be an educational failure." Murmurs of discomfort and curiosity rippled through the room. Major Miller, a veteran of 3 decades, frowned. "General, with all due respect, wouldn't this be rather humiliating for a civilian?" Hayes smirked. "Humiliating, Major, this is reality. When war comes knocking, there'll be no time for pleasantries. The people need to understand that there are prepared men and ordinary men." Outside, in the small town of Red Rock bordering the base, Rosemary Santos calmly swept the dirt floor of her modest home. At 43, her hands bore the marks of time and hard work. Her graying hair was pulled back in an unpretentious bun, and her serene gaze seemed to hold hidden depths. She was known in the region as a midwife and herbalist, a woman of few words who arrived quietly when women went into labor or when someone needed her medicinal herbs. At that moment, 2 soldiers approached her house. "Are you Rosemary Santos?" asked Corporal Evans, consulting a clipboard. "I am," she replied, leaning her broom against the wall and wiping her hands on her faded apron. "General Hayes requests your presence at the base to participate in a civilian exercise. It's a unique opportunity to see our facilities." Rose observed the 2 men silently for a few seconds. There was something in their eyes, a depth that didn't match their simple appearance, that made the corporal feel inexplicably uneasy. "When?" she asked. "Now, if possible, ma'am." She nodded, grabbed a shawl, and accompanied them to the base. During the ride in the military truck, Rose remained silent, gazing out the window at the parched fields and the intense blue sky. The soldiers attempted to make small talk, but she responded only with gestures or monosyllabic words. There was an unnerving calmness about her, as if she already knew what awaited her. At the base, Rose was led into a room where about 30 military personnel and civilian specialists awaited her. General Hayes, imposing in his impeccable uniform, examined her from head to toe with a superior smile. "So, you're Rose," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Midwife, isn't it? You work with your hands, simple things." "I work with life," she softly corrected, showing no intimidation. The reply elicited some muffled laughter in the room. Hayes frowned. "Well, Rose, today you'll participate in a little test. We'll take you to our most advanced flight simulator, a machine that costs more than your entire town, and see how an ordinary person fares in a situation that requires years of preparation." Rose simply nodded. "And what should I do?" "Simple," said Hayes, gesturing dramatically. "You'll have 30 seconds to take off a plane. Don't worry, it's just a simulation. Nobody expects you to succeed." The room fell into an awkward silence. Some officers exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared question the general. Rose was led to the simulator, a sophisticated cabin identical to the cockpit of an F-5 fighter, surrounded by high-definition screens that perfectly reproduced the flying experience. When Rose entered the cabin, something strange happened. Her breathing changed slightly, and she placed her hands on the controls with an almost reverent gentleman. The engineers operating the system noticed small changes on their monitors. Her heartbeat, which had remained surprisingly steady since her arrival, now showed an unusual rhythmic pattern, almost as if her body were synchronizing with some invisible frequency. 30 seconds, announced Hayes, activating the timer. Starting now. What happened next defied all known logic among those present. Rose, without hesitation, began touching the correct controls in perfect sequence. Her hands moved with surgical precision. She adjusted the power levers, checked the navigation instruments, activated the flight control systems. On the main screen, the simulated plane began to gain speed on the runway. 15 seconds, someone murmured incredulously. Rose increased engine power, gently pulled back the stick, and at 28 seconds, the simulated plane took off perfectly, ascending in an impeccable trajectory. Silence fell over the room. Several officers stared at each other, mouths agape. General Hayes, for the first time in decades, seemed to have lost control of the situation. "Stop," he shouted. "Turn off that machine." The technicians obeyed, and Rose calmly exited the cabin. Her expression remained serene, as if she had just completed a routine task. "I need to go home," she said simply. "Mrs. Joseph is pregnant with twins and may need me." Hayes approached her, his face red with indignation and confusion. "How? How did you do that? Who trained you? Who's behind this?" Rose looked at him with those deep, calm eyes. "Nobody trained me, General. I simply knew." During the following hours, the base buzzed with activity. General Hayes ordered a full investigation, background checks, interrogations with the residents of Red Rock, and analysis of the security systems. He couldn't accept that a simple woman, without any training, had performed a takeoff that many of his rookie pilots failed. But the more they investigated, the more mysterious Rose became. Residents confirmed her story. She was born there, lived there, and never left the region. She worked as a midwife and herbalist, lived modestly, and had no formal education beyond elementary school. She would wake up speaking strange words: altitude, navigation, turbulence, words that no one in Red Rock knew. For years, she drew airplanes with precise detail on any paper she could find, using twigs in the dirt when there was no other option. Her mother, a superstitious woman, believed Rose had visions of the heavens, a spiritual gift that connected her to angels. The local priest suggested it was divine intervention. Neighbors whispered about witchcraft. But Rose knew it was different. In her dreams, she didn't just fly. She was the plane. She felt every vibration of the engines, every resistance of the air, every adjustment needed to maintain the perfect balance between power and lift. Over time, she learned to hide these gifts. She focused on what the community accepted: healing, assisting in births, preparing natural remedies. But the dreams never stopped. And today, for the first time in her life, she had touched the real controls she only knew in visions. At the base, General Hayes couldn't sleep. He called an emergency meeting with intelligence and military psychology specialists. Dr. Pardoso, the Air Force psychologist, presented the first results of the tests performed on Rose. "General, the data is inexplicable. Her motor coordination, spatial perception, and reaction time are far above the human average. But not only that, the neurological patterns we detected suggest a rare form of synesthesia, where she literally feels the operation of complex machinery." "Synesthesia?" Hayes asked, irritated. "It's a neurological condition where the senses blend. Some people see colors when they hear music. But Rose's case is different. She seems to process mechanical information intuitively, almost as if the machines were extensions of her own body." Major Miller spoke up. "But that wouldn't explain how she knew how to operate a plane she'd never seen." Dr. Cardoso hesitated. It's impossible. Even with synesthesia, specific technical knowledge needs to be learned. Unless, he paused, as if considering an absurd possibility. Unless what? Pressed Hayes. Unless there are forms of knowledge that we still don't fully understand. The investigation continued for the following days. Specialists from Washington, D.C., and even some international consultants were discreetly contacted. Rose underwent advanced medical examinations, brain mapping, and psychological tests. Each result only deepened the mystery. During one of these sessions, Dr. Helena Montero, a renowned neuroscientist, made a disturbing discovery. Her brain waves during the simulation are identical to those of experienced pilots in real flight. Not just similar, identical, as if her brain had already neurologically mapped the experience of flying. Meanwhile, Rose continued her normal life. She assisted in the delivery of Mrs. Joseph's twins, cured a child with a high fever, and prepared ointments for the dry season's arthritic pains. But something had changed. The dreams intensified. Now she flew consciously aware that it was more than imagination. A week after the incident, Hayes decided to conduct a second test, this time with more sophisticated monitoring equipment. He called Rose again, but now with a different approach. "Rose," he said, trying to sound less arrogant, "we'd like to repeat the exercise, but this time with some additional measurements. Would that be possible?" She silently agreed. During the second test, they connected electrodes to monitor her brain activity, sensors to measure her physiological response, and high-speed cameras to analyze every movement. The challenge was increased. Now she had to not only take off, but also execute a complete sequence of aerial maneuvers. The result was even more impressive. Rose executed perfect turns, controlled altitude with millimeter precision, and performed maneuvers that required years of practice. Throughout the process, her vital signs remained stable, as if she were simply walking in her backyard. But it was when Dr. Montero analyzed the neurological data that the most disturbing discovery emerged. "General," she said, her voice trembling, "during the simulated flight, Rose's brain activated areas that are only developed after thousands of hours of real-world experience. It's as if she had a lifetime of piloting engraved in her neurological memory." Hayes felt a chill. What does that mean? It means that somehow Rose has flown before, long ago, thousands of times. That night, Hayes visited Rose at her home. It was a simple structure of exposed brick with a small herb garden in front. She received him with tea and homemade cookies, as she would any neighbor. "Rose," he began, uncomfortable with the informality of the situation, "I need you to tell me the truth. How did you learn to fly?" She observed him for a long moment, as if assessing whether he was ready for the answer. "General, do you believe in dreams?" "Dreams? Since I was little, I've flown. Every night, without exception. They aren't ordinary dreams. They're memories of places I've never visited, machines I've never seen, skies I've never crossed while awake. During the day, I live here, I take care of people, I work with my hands. During the night, I'm a pilot." Hayes nervously laughed. "Rose, that's impossible. Dreams are just—" "Have you ever flown, General?" she softly interrupted him. "Sure, I've been a pilot for 40 years. Then you know the feeling of being 10,000 feet up when the air gets thin, and how you have to adjust your breathing. You know how the plane vibrates differently when you're losing lift, and the specific sound the engines make when they're at their limit. You know there's a moment during takeoff when you feel it's not you controlling the plane anymore, but the two of you becoming one." Hayes stared at her, speechless. She had described sensations he'd never shared with anyone, intimate experiences known only to veteran pilots. "I know all that too, General. I've lived it every night for 35 years. From that moment on, everything changed at the base. Rose was no longer an experiment or a curiosity. She was a phenomenon that defied contemporary scientific understanding. Researchers from renowned universities arrived, neurology specialists, cognitive psychologists, even a quantum physicist who speculated about consciousness and parallel realities. And here, dear listeners, I need to pause our story. If you're feeling the same chill I felt when I discovered this extraordinary story, if you're realizing how sometimes reality surpasses any fiction, then you understand the power of stories that transform our perspective on what's possible. Please subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell, because stories like Rose's remind us that the world still holds mysteries that can revolutionize our understanding of human nature. And now, let's return to what happened when the investigations deepened further. During the following weeks, Rose underwent several experiments. They tested her abilities with different types of aircraft: helicopters, gliders, commercial jets. In all cases, she demonstrated surprisingly instinctive knowledge. Even more disturbing, when they put headphones on her with recordings of different aircraft engines, she could identify not only the aircraft model, but also specific mechanical problems. "This engine has a problem with the fuel pump," she said during a blind test, "and this one has wear on the turbine bearings." The technicians confirmed the recordings were of planes with exactly those problems. Dr. James Patterson, a British neuroscientist specializing in extraordinary consciousness phenomena, came to the US specifically to study Rose. After a battery of tests, he made a statement that shocked the entire scientific community involved. Rose doesn't just dream that she flies. During REM sleep, her brain activity is identical to that of pilots in real flight. It's as if she had access to a library of experiences that don't belong to her conscious life. But it was during a hypnosis session that the most disturbing truth emerged. Under deep hypnosis, Rose began speaking fluent English, a language she had never studied, describing combat missions, geographical coordinates of international air bases, classified military protocols. Even more frightening, she mentioned the names of real pilots, some dead for decades, describing their personalities and personal histories with accuracy. Hayes, who was watching the session, paled when Rose, still under hypnosis, said, "Captain Thompson is worried about his wife. She's sick, breast cancer, stage 2. Hayes knew Thompson, an American pilot who had died in 1987. His wife had indeed had cancer during the mentioned period, information that was never publicly released. "How can she know that?" Hayes murmured to Patterson. "That's what we're trying to find out, General." The investigation took unexpected turns when one of the researchers suggested something revolutionary. What if Rose had access to what Jung called the collective unconscious, a kind of shared memory of humanity? What if her neurological synesthesia allowed her to access the experiences of other pilots, living or dead? The hypothesis sounded absurd, but the data were undeniable. During further tests, Rose demonstrated knowledge of historical air crashes, accurately describing the final moments of flights that ended in tragedy, always from the pilot's perspective. She cried during these sessions, as if reliving the deaths of people she had never met. "I feel it when they die," she said after a particularly intense session. "I feel the fear, the despair, the desperate attempt to save the plane. And then, silence." Dr. Patterson meticulously documented everything. Rose's case was becoming one of the most studied phenomena in modern neuroscience. Universities around the world requested access to the data. Some theorized about genetic memory, others about quantum consciousness, others still about parallel dimensions of reality. But Rose remained the same, simple person as always. She continued to help with births, cure colds, and prepare ointments. The only difference was that now, when she looked at the sky, she smiled with a familiarity she hadn't fully understood before. 3 months after the first test, Hayes made a decision that shocked his superiors. He recommended that Rose be considered for real pilot training. "Gentlemen," he said in a video conference with the High Command, "we have before us a phenomenon that could revolutionize our understanding of military training. Rose possesses innate abilities that take decades to develop in our best pilots. The proposal was met with skepticism and resistance. How could a midwife with no formal education be considered for military aviation? But the data spoke for themselves. In increasingly complex simulations, Rose consistently outperformed experienced pilots. It was during one of these advanced simulations that something extraordinary happened. Rose was piloting a virtual fighter jet on a simulated combat mission when suddenly she stopped all controls. "Something's wrong," she said, removing her headphones. "What?" asked the simulator operator. "This plane shouldn't be flying. There's a crack in the right wing structure, near the third attachment point. In approximately 15 minutes of real flight, it would fail completely." Technicians verified the real aircraft corresponding to the simulator. Rose was right. There was a microfracture exactly where she had indicated, invisible to the naked eye, but detectable only by specialized ultrasound equipment. The discovery potentially saved the lives of pilots and cost millions in equipment. From that moment on, Rose was consulted about technical problems in aircraft. Her ability to sense mechanical defects became legendary at the base. She could identify problems that even the most advanced computers hadn't yet detected. 6 months after their first meeting, General Hayes organized a demonstration for a commission of officers from Washington, D.C. Rose, now wearing a pilot's jumpsuit that was slightly too large, entered a real airplane for the first time. It was a small, single-engine training aircraft supervised by 2 veteran instructors. What happened during that flight changed everything. Rose didn't just pilot the plane, she flew with a grace and naturalness that left the instructors speechless. She executed complex maneuvers with the precision of someone with thousands of flight hours, feeling every air current, every pressure change, every nuance of the aircraft's behavior. "It's like she was born with wings," reported Captain Miller, one of the instructors. When they landed, Rose got out of the plane with tears in her eyes. "Finally," she murmured, "finally, I'm home." That night, General Hayes found her sitting alone in the hangar, watching the sleeping planes. "Rose," he said, sitting beside her, "I have a proposal for you." She looked at him, waiting. "I'd like you to consider becoming an instructor here at the base, officially. Your gifts could save lives and revolutionize our training." Rose was silent for a long time. "General," she finally said, "all my life I thought I was different, strange. The people in town always saw." In the months that followed, Rose became a legend in military aviation. Her unique ability to train pilots, detect mechanical problems, and execute impossible maneuvers attracted international attention. Delegations from various countries came to study her case. But Rose never lost her essence. She continued living in the same simple house, continued assisting with births, continued preparing medicinal teas. The difference was that now she also flew, officially, and taught others to fly with the same instinctive passion that guided her. During an interview for a documentary about her case, the reporter asked, "Rose, do you consider yourself a miracle?" She thought for a moment. "I don't know if I'm a miracle. I know that each person carries within themselves abilities they don't even imagine. Sometimes it takes someone to challenge us, even out of arrogance or disbelief, for us to discover who we really are." General Hayes, who was watching the interview, lowered his head. During those months, he had learned a humbling lesson about underestimating people. His initial arrogance almost caused him to miss the opportunity to meet one of the most extraordinary phenomena of his career. "Rose," he said after the interview, "I owe you an apology. When I brought you here, it was to humiliate you and prove my superiority. Instead, you taught me about humility." Rose smiled with that serenity that had become her trademark. "General, sometimes God uses our arrogance to reveal His grace. You didn't humiliate me. You liberated me." Years later, when Rose was already known internationally as the Dream Pilot, she still maintained her double routine. In the morning, she flew. In the afternoon, she cared for the people of Red Rock. And at night, she dreamed, no longer of mysterious flights, but of new ways to use her gifts to serve. The military base was transformed into a research center on consciousness and extraordinary human abilities. Scientists from all over the world came to study not only Rose, but other similar cases that were discovered after her revelation. It was discovered that impossible abilities were more common than imagined. They were simply not recognized or developed. In one of her last interviews, Rose made a statement that became famous. "I believe that each person has their own sky that they need to discover. Mine was literal. It was the blue skies where I always flew in my dreams. Yours may be different. It may be music, medicine, art, teaching. But we all have wings. Sometimes we just need someone to give us the opportunity to use them." General Hayes, now retired, became a passionate advocate for programs that identified hidden talents in underserved communities. "Rose taught me," he said in lectures, "that true power lies not in underestimating others, but in giving them opportunities to surprise. The greatest military victory of my career was recognizing that I was wrong." Rose's story spread throughout the world, inspiring research on neuroplasticity, collective consciousness, and latent human potential. But for her, the real victory was not in fame or scientific recognition. It was in the possibility of fully living who she always was, a woman who cared for life on Earth and danced with freedom in the heavens. Today, when young pilots arrive at the base for training, the first lesson they learn is not about aerodynamics or navigation. It's about humility, respect, and the understanding that true strength comes not from subjugating others, but from recognizing and cultivating the extraordinary that exists in every human being. And Rose? Rose continues to fly, not only with airplanes, but with dreams. Dreams of a world where no one is underestimated for their appearance, origin, or simplicity. Where each person has the chance to discover their wings and use them to uplift not only themselves, but all of humanity. Because, in the end, the most powerful lesson of her story isn't about flying planes. It's about navigating your own life with courage, purpose, and the unshakable belief that within each of us there's an infinite sky waiting to be explored.